He was called an old man who had nothing left to prove. The guild simply expelled him without even thinking. But everything he ever did was forging. Day after day, weapon after weapon. And somehow his creations do not remain just ordinary, they change and transform. They become something much greater than he intended. Now in a new place among reliable people. In his favorite occupation. He himself will relentlessly develop because this old man has no bloom. The story begins with the main character, the blacksmith. Darrett received a letter from the military, and the girl wrote to her teacher that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Already 10 years, she asked him for a favor to move to the capital. The main character wrote a letter and smiling said, "Militer, so nostalgic." He remembered how they first met. It was a few weeks ago. He was working in the city of Reborn in the blacksmith guild. That day, a sign of the guild master appeared, called him, and told him that he was fired. The host, embarrassed, repeated this. Needed fired, but why? For what reason? The guild master answered irritably. Working for the guild was of no benefit to him. He did not justify himself. Derek looked embarrassed at the boss and asked to be explained more simply. The guild master got angry and said that the price-quality ratio was simply terrible, so he was firing him. But he has a ton of work, let him just get out of here. The secretary next to him quietly giggled. I had no idea someone would say that. Okay. He leaves, watching the main character walk away, signing off and gloating, well, that's good. Behind the main character, the door slammed loudly. Soon, a kind woman with a child gave him a ride home. On the way, he fixed the toy and the baby exclaimed with joy, the horse moves. The baby thanked MC. Dressing him as grandpa, waving goodbye to the child and her mother, he felt. A wave of sadness overwhelmed him. He thought that he devoted 30 years of his life to blacksmithing, and now he was quite an old man. Barrett set out on a journey to the kingdom of Gloss, too. He set out for the capital. Upon arrival, he was very surprised. There were more people than before. Thinking about it, he will endure. He barely left his hometown, Rayton. His release became a good opportunity. He approached the butcher's shop and asked what she would recommend. The woman asked if he would like roasted boar cow meat. He thought, why not? After paying, he thanked the seller and began to enjoy the juicy meat, not believing how tasty it was. The saleswoman noticed that she had never seen him here before. Where is he from? Dyatt replied. He worked at the forge, but he was fired. Suddenly screams, the woman was shouting at the merchant, or was he? He realized how much that falchion cost and that he hadn't even cut the branch. It was holding the broken weapon. The saleswoman answered irritably, she simply doesn't know how to use it. The main character wondered if they were arguing. The seller replied, just having come out of the weapons shop. Their weapons have a not very good reputation. The main character chuckled thoughtfully, thinking that such things happen everywhere. He told the woman that he would go and take a quick look. She warned him to be careful. Carefully, making his way through the crowd of spectators, he apologized again and again. And moved forward. Dell kept shouting at the merchant, saying that the steel sword should handle that plant monster. He sold her a fake, right? The shopkeeper answered angrily. He already told her that she has no proof. The woman was boiling with rage. Her little daughter, standing nearby, began begging her mother to leave. The main character looked at the broken sword in Dell's hand and he thought, this is steel, right? Okay, he turned to the merchant and told him that lying is bad. Both sides looked at him in surprise. Dyatt continued, he is also a blacksmith, and this falchion is clearly not made of steel, just tin. The merchant shouted irritably, nothing like that, it's all slander, that. The main character turned to the woman, asked her for the rest of the weapons for a second, and said, here is the proof. Everything is visible on the blade itself. The waves are clearly distinguishable. If it were steel. If there were steel inside, the pattern would be even. People in the crowd began to murmur. This old man is right. One blacksmith he knew told him something similar. They need to call a guard. The merchant cursed him fiercely and looked with hatred. The main character said that he deceives people by taking advantage of their ignorance. Only a miserable blacksmith would do that. He must be a blacksmith who takes responsibility. The merchant hissed angrily, shut up, because of him he will lose customers. Finally, the merchant grabbed the sword from the counter, lunged at the host with it, and shouted irritably, no. Don't you dare lecture me on morals. Dorrit didn't lose his composure. He swore, pushed away all the spectators, and took an F pose. He took a fighting stance. At that moment, a female voice broke out. A voice burst out outside, ordering them to stop. It was military-like. He instantly squeezed between them and pushed the merchant aside, and ordered her soldiers to take him away. The whole crowd erupted with joy. Justice does exist in the world after all, they began. And whispered, that was the commander of the soldiers. Dell thanked the girl and the protagonist. Hearing the people's words, he was surprised. The commander had tousled his He ran his hand through his hair and thanked her, adding that thanks to her he was saved. The girl replied, "It's my job." Then she looked at him intently and asked, "Is he by any chance the one who? Who does she think he is?" MC thought shyly. Does he look unemployed or maybe he is about to be arrested for being a suspicious old man? The girl asked again, "Is he by any chance a teacher?" Suddenly she rushed to him and exclaimed joyfully, "She is Nilitara." He remembered. Does he remember her? He made her a toy sword 10 years ago. Dyer looked at her intently. She exclaimed joyfully how much she had grown, and he did not even think they would meet here. The girl was happy, so it really was him. To him, he did receive her letter, right? Her soldiers asked who this man was. Nilitara said he took care of her when she was very little. She checked. Talked to him a little, let them return first. The military reported that they had her order was understood and they left. The main character, embarrassed, asked, "Did she become a commander?" The girl smiled and Malden replied, "Yes, thanks to him." He exclaimed joyfully and she added, "What an incredible achievement. No, all this is thanks to this sword." Saying this, she pulled out her. She drew her weapon from the sheath. He extended it, surprised. "A sword? What do you mean?" The soldiers handed it over and asked him to look at her. He took her weapon, drew the sword from the sheath, and confused, thought, "The sword is black like tar." It was a divine magical sword, Shinma rank S with a holy element. That. The protagonist exclaimed in confusion, "This is the country's treasure," said Militar. "In fact, he created it," he muttered in confusion. How could he not remember such a weapon? Could it be that dementia had already set in? The girl asked his permission to rephrase, "Here is that toy." Toy sword it evolved? Darrett asked, puzzled. He had never heard what she was saying. "Never heard of such a thing," she said. She hadn't heard either, but the weapon changed. It gradually changed shape as it grew, and eventually became exactly like that. It seems the weapon he created can evolve defense. The protagonist looked at the sword again and thought distrustfully, "Isn't this the toy sword from those times?" Everything became clear. Was it really once a toy? Hard to believe. Militari said she called it maturity of feelings. Her hypothesis is justified. When he wrote and created objects, did anyone ever notice anything like that? The main character. The Argonist replied, "No, there were even more adventurers there, and in this city people are F. They often changed their things. Like a blacksmith, he couldn't show himself there. That's how Iwashi's works were thrown away faster than they could develop. No one even suspected such a thing." The girl noticed correctly and called him because she asked for a favor. The main character noticed that she wrote about it in a letter. What did she need? The military said it was simple. Could he become the personal blacksmith of their brave army? With these words, the girl, full of emotions, rushed forward. He rushed to him and grabbed his hand. Dyer, without expecting this, he jumped back from her and screamed in panic. "Not that's too much," she insisted. She begged him. They had no one else to ask. The main character asked. Confused, "But why?" The military replied, "There are certain circumstances." He stood bewildered. What exactly are the circumstances? At that very moment, Dell and her daughter Confi approached them and apologized for interrupting. To him, the woman sincerely thanked him for the help. She did not even know how to repay him. Confi reported to military how. Commander said, "Thank you very much." The girl replied that she saw her at the induction ceremony and was glad that no one was hurt. She abruptly grabbed MC by the collar, pulled him along, and said that they needed her. "Hurry," he flustered, exclaimed. "Where to?" Dell shouted, stepping back. They left, wanted to thank him, and advised to visit the tavern in the Eastern District. Darrett waved at them with a smile and promised to drop by. He thought he had useful connections. She advised him not to say anything, or he might even bite his own tongue, and she pulled him along with her. Catching surprised glances from passers-by, meanwhile in his hometown in the Blacksmith Guild, Dinin was showing off in front of the mirror. Looking at the reflection, he could not take his eyes off how dazzling he was. Then he went out into the hall and greeted the employees. They responded to him. Hildmeister announced that they were the first to start the morning meeting and immediately took up the philosophy of their guild. At that moment, the guild doors suddenly opened and Senji, the royal envoy, entered, gave a sign. With surprise, they asked who they were. Senji immediately asked, "Is Mr. Darrett here?" And he is an envoy from. He is from the royal palace. His name is Senji. He is looking for the famous blacksmith Darrett. He came to ask him for a favor. Sign up. Sign up. Surprised, everything became clear. A favor for Derek. No. Darrett, he is the guildmaster here. Does he happen to have any favors for Lord Seinon? When they sent it, you answered no, the guild leader from. This answer and the guards drove him mad. Those who came with the royal envoy covered their lord. He immediately signed, calmed down, and said that the blacksmith is in. He is no longer here. He fired that useless fool. Senji shouted, confused. Fired? What do you mean? The leader replied that he only exhausts resources and shows no respect at all. He got what? What he deserved. Senji, as if about to faint, repeated in confusion, Lord Darrett. Not here. The blacksmith whom the queen herself valued was fired. How unfortunate it all turned out. Guards handed the envoy a long box and asked what they should do. What to do with this? Sign it. I see this, he said, just to give it to him. Send you the item. They objected but were ordered to give it specifically to Darrett. The guild master snatched the box from the guards and exclaimed, "What's in this box? Let him see it," someone shouted. Senji asked indignantly, "What is he doing here?" Here, Sinon shouted, "He is the guild master. He is much more experienced than this black." The blacksmith placed the box on the table, opened it, and upon seeing the weapon, froze with admiration before the angelic sword Amatsurugi. The weapon was S-rank and belonged to the holy element, and the guild master simply froze in place and said, "Truly magnificent, the sword of a true angel." Senji said that it should have been given to Lord Dur for repair. The guildmaster exclaimed in surprise, "This is a treasure. Why to him?" To him, replied the envoy, because he created it. He signed and thought wildly, straightforward. But it was created by Lord Dur himself. He grabbed Senju by the collar. They shook him and shouted, "This is not funny. That idiot could not have created this garden." Guards rushed to the guildmaster, demanding to release their master. They pulled an old sign on the side as if trying to calm him. The envoy said, "Well, yes. Yes, it was not like that, but Amatsurugi, a sword that evolved." The guildmaster, confused, exclaimed, "The sword evolved? They really think it is an idiot," said Senji, and it was true. The queen immediately ordered to start the search for this. Sinon felt like he was going crazy. The queen, the treasure, the evolution. He shouted, "No, he will not endure this. He will fix it." He just fixed it himself, then grabbed the sword. The messenger anxiously tried to stop him. They told him to stop because he was not Darrett. He signed, protested, but he turned out to be him after all. He was a guild master, therefore the best blacksmith here. He smugly repeated, "I am a guild master, let them wait." There was a sense of weight here. Senji thought, it makes sense the leader expelled them from the guild. Telling them to wait outside, he looked at the blade and muttered, "Problem is that I could just sharpen this on a wet stone." Starting the work, he thought that he had never sharpened a sword in his life. But he watched how the workers did it, learned and managed it himself. He will handle this. His observation is simply top-notch. He is mastering. Everything was at the master's level when suddenly, the messenger and guards heard a loud noise from the guild building. They were gripped by anxiety. Senji began knocking on the door, shouting to the guild master, "What is that loud noise? Is he okay?" The sign replied, "Since you are Groodly, he is still working. Tell them to be silent. Actually, GSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSS is bad, he broke into the nation's treasure. Execute him, hang him, behead him, drown him, this is a terrible crime. What should he do? Kneeling down, he placed his hands on his chest. He applied his breathing technique and slowly calmed down. He had to calm down, gather his thoughts, and find a solution, after some time. Here it is, he exclaimed, if the blade cracked, you just need to glue the halves together. There must be some temporary glue around here. The guild master frantically rustled. He rummaged through the drawers and quickly found what he was looking for. After some time, he approached the The messenger nodded and thanked him for waiting. Senji noticed he handled it quickly. Guild master clear. Understood, well, let him inspect his work, shouted Seinon. An amateur should not touch it. Nothing can be done with the sword. The sword won't last long. The envoy wanted to object, but the guild master exclaimed irritably. Does he want to say that he doubts? Do you doubt him? Senji answered awkwardly. That's not the point. Sinon herself drew the sword, showed it to the messenger, and asked, is it as beautiful as before? Once, Senji looked closely and said that he still noticed roughness on the blade. Sinon objected, that's Ali has imagining it. In any case, it needs to be put back in place. He will simply return this treasure to where it belongs. When he was doing this, he thought if they noticed it later, he could have blamed everything on them. But at that moment, something unexpected happened. The sword seemed to have torn itself from his hands. Whirl in the air, fall to the floor, and split in half. Everyone froze in shock. No one understood what was happening. How could this have happened? A moment later, Senji shouted at. He glared angrily at Sinon. Wasn't he supposed to fix it? The guild master faltered. He glanced at the surprised crowd, raised his head, and said how strange he was. He was absolutely sure that he had fixed it. Maybe he was wrong. The emissary grabbed his head, not knowing what to do, and suddenly saw. Suddenly he shouted the sign ON, you idiot, what? What did he do? After these words, he hit the guildmaster in the face with all his might. Sinan was outraged. What is he even doing? The messenger was furious. He knew he could not rely on him. The guildmaster tried to object, saying it was rude. Senji looked at him and announced in a grim voice. Someone shouted loudly that he was under arrest. Meanwhile, Tourette told me the army and everything that happened to it. Finally, he bitterly summed up that he was expelled from the guild. The girl bowed her head in sadness, hit the table with her fists, and said, "To dismiss such a famous blacksmith, this guildmaster is as dumb as a brick. This is just the height. This is the pinnacle of incompetence, right?" She angrily stabbed the dessert with a fork, and the main character even flinched. He flinched at that gesture. At that very moment, Sinan was being taken by carriage to the capital. The guards ordered the clumsy craftsman not to move. The guild leader, sitting between the guards, looked around confusedly. How did it all happen? No, it's all because of Direct. He will definitely get rid of it because of this. Take revenge soon at the gross military base Millet. The military apologized to the main hero for asking him to become their personal blacksmith. He replied, "It's okay, now he needs to hear what he has to know." She replied, "Fine, let him see for himself." The girl led him to a large building and said that it was their forge. The main hero noted with admiration that it was clearly a military forge large. When she led him inside and apologized, all the workers saw this. Seeing her, they lined up, saluted her, and greeted her. The girl gave them the command, "At ease." The workers asked who she was. The man next to her replied Milite. "Here he is, Mr. Dara, the one who forged her sword." Everyone looked at him with surprise. He shyly said that he was glad to meet everyone and introduced himself. The workers, who openly admired him, started chatting. Just imagine they met such a legendary blacksmith. Maybe the commander was deceiving everyone. He was so old and did not look like the creator at all. The legendary sword, the protagonist thought awkwardly, "Aha, old." Again, he himself still could not believe it. Military asked, "So where is Nana Hikari?" The workers answered, "He worked a little and then left." The girl irritably threw a remark, and the apprentices started to excuse themselves again. They told him, but he ignored them. The protagonist asked her in surprise, who was she talking about? The girl. The girl answered, "Yes, their current blacksmith, Nana Hikari. His family made huge donations. He is the only son." Duke Felgrimdi, with such an unpleasant character, he is also a bad blacksmith. For now, they can only suppressed his eternal dissatisfaction. He thought that there are people who that's everywhere, she added, but he, the teacher, at that moment was on a completely different level. The moment the one who first started the conversation entered the forge and exclaimed, "It's dirty here as always." The villager, calling him by name, barked, "Where the hell have you been?" The protagonist held his breath in surprise. Looking at that guy, he looked exactly like him. Nana Hikari in. Harry answered the commander. "Is he on a date?" asked one of the workers. "And what about the longsword?" The boy raised the weapon and lazily said, "This one, let him take it." And having said that, he threw the weapon to the worker. The sword did not reach its fate. It landed right in front of the worker, causing him to sharply jump aside. The weapon fell to the floor. The floor, thought the protagonist, embarrassed. "Are you serious right now?" He doesn't even try to hide his terrible temper. Nana Hikari remarked, "Well, how do you like it?" "Perfect." The worker picked up the weapon and thanked the blacksmith, Proda. The hero looked at the blade of the sword and thought embarrassedly, "Terrible work," as if no one had even touched it. He wanted to ask the military about this. The worker also noticed that. Seeing the poor quality, he openly showed his dissatisfaction on his face. Kari, noticing this, said that he had already fixed it. Is there something does not please him? With these words, he simply jumped up and sharply pulled the worker by the collar. The main character could no longer stand it. He sharply approached them and removing Nana Hikari's hand from the work. The worker decisively told him, "If you are a blacksmith, fix your work." The duke's son shouted, "What does he want?" He ordered him to quickly remove his hands from him. The soldiers tried to calm the duke's son, whispering that this man is the blacksmith who forged her legendary sword. From Rayton, Nana Hikari's surprise spoke. "What did she say?" She added, "He is already a first-class blacksmith, and now they will have another one like him." The duke's son said, "Then let him show what he is capable of." Darrett asked him. He asked in surprise. "Him?" exclaimed Nana Hikari. "Yes, it will be a duel of blacksmiths. They will fight with swords. The swords they made, whoever sword breaks loses, but there are two conditions. First of all, they can only use the materials found here. His sword will end up in the hands of that novice named Confi, the main character." Recognizing, the girl exclaimed in surprise, Confi, how long has she been here? She is so tiny." He was so small that he didn't even notice her. The girl looked at them in amazement. The main character replied to Nana Hikari, "All right." "Okay," he agrees. Militaria, embarrassed, called her teacher. Duke's son replied, "Decided, the duel in 5." He only had 5 days. If he loses, he will return to his native village. The main character said that if he manages to win, he will take his job. Work seriously, Nana Hikari snorted with contempt and asked who he was anyway. The forge was his. After that, he left. The girl bowed to Darrett and apologized. She only made the situation worse. The main character objected. No, it was not her fault. At that moment, Confy ran up to them and addressed the commander, asking with tears in her eyes. What should she do? She can only take care of the sword, the protagonist reassures. He assured the girl that everything would be fine. He would make a sword with which she could not lose. Not every blacksmith is capable of crafting truly high-quality weapons from fragments. Let her rely on him. Militer and Confy looked at him admiringly. When MC entered his workshop, looking around, he noticed that it was filled only with having D-rank materials. It was time to get to work, and meanwhile he was tightening on his gloves. The soldiers entered and said, she hasn't seen him work for a long time. Just a little more, can you watch over this? He replied from afar, please. He agreed and settled in the farthest corner. Darrett began forging. He thought about it. It was a plan in his mind. Step by step, going through the next steps, he hammers a. Striking the metal, he suddenly noticed that he hadn't held a hammer in his hands for only a few weeks. But the blood of the blacksmith still boiled in him. The soldiers watched his actions, he thought with a smile. What a pleasant sound. The main hero smiled happily. He couldn't hold back. He truly enjoyed blacksmithing. Raising the magical thunder stone in his hands to make it even sharper, he pondered. I need to sharpen the sword. It would create the best weapon for Confy. After all, he could definitely do it. After some time, the hero placed the finished sword in front of him and, sitting next to it, looked at it. He worked on it intently. Militaria asked if he was finished yet. He replied, yes, of course, when a man works like. With 30 years as a blacksmith behind him, he got to work quickly, and the weapon turned out to be S-rank, a treasure. It was higher rank than he thought, although no, hardly. The girl looked at the finished weapon and noted that it seemed he had clearly overdone it. He shyly laughed in response. In a moment, Militaria informed the soldiers that Lord Darrett's sword was ready and called Confite to her. Everyone suddenly started talking. It was immediately clear he was a true master. How lightning fast everything happened. What kind of sword was it? When Confy approached the commander, she couldn't help but ask, is the sword ready already? The main hero said yes, indeed, and he wanted to give it to her. He immediately rushed to her, raised his hand with the weapon, and said, this is his own sword, the ordinary Thunder Emperor. It was an S-rank pair. An item with a holy element. Everyone froze and looked at the sword with admiration. The main hero placed it in Confy's hands and anxiously warned her to be careful because the sword was very sharp. The girl who was looking at the weapon exclaimed with delight, what a beautiful sword. Militara said that MC put his whole heart into it, so she should not let him down. Let her not allow these feelings to be wasted. Confire reported that she would do exactly that. And the girl told everyone that before the fight she would train Confy. The soldiers burst out with joy, shouting, under the commander's protection she will become stronger. She told the girl, tomorrow be sharp as a pin. The girl happily replied that she would. He wished her luck. Meanwhile, in the Nanahikari mansion, he shouted, I am furious, that older, how dare he act like that? Such a thing, he complained to Ijin, his maid, let her see him. His hand was even red. He will not forgive this idiot. He shouted the maid's name. She looked at him gloomily and asked, well, what? Her gaze confused his head. He thought she was very capable but also creepy. He said loudly, it is necessary to document these bruises and sue him. The girl who was treating his hand sharply replied, no, he was surprised. Why? She answered, bandaging the reddened spot on his hand was completely fine. The duke's son hissed irritably but did not answer. Ijin looked at the table. Someone asked, are these the materials? Nana Hikari proudly replied, these are S-rank materials, solid metal. Metal, stone of the thunder god, platinum steel, scale of the earth dragon, stone of the eternal flame. He pulled out the best F from his storage. This will allow him to forge the best sword that damn blacksmith has ever seen. She again dryly replied that she understood. He laughed quietly and thought, let that old man see, he will still get his. For his revenge, the day of training came. Militar Arm grimly told Confy that she would not become a sword master. She will become a master in 5 days, and no one knew who her opponent would be. The main heroine looked at. Gaze fell on the girl, full of anxiety. The girl continued, but the most important thing. Her task is not to let the sword break, and she knows how to do it. After a few training sessions, Confy suddenly exclaimed. She realized, you just need to parry the enemy's attacks, right? The commander praised her and told her to go. Get ready. Lunging forward, she shouted, watch and remember. Mondi watched in fear as she rapidly approached. He was searched. The protagonist also tensed. What was she doing? The militaris approached the girl she was holding. He thrust the sword forward, blocking his strike, said the commander. Don't let her escape, she had to parry with the blade, Conti replied. He answered that she understood. She asked again. Conti agreed. The girl lunged at her again. Her weapon was drawn forward. The girl wondered whether to block. She lowered the blade and positioned it correctly. She was able to parry the strike again. Again, she realized with surprise that it worked. She turned around to ask a question. She looked questioningly at the commander, and Militaria said she was lost. Conti looked at her and, confused, she strictly ordered her not to lose vigilance in battle. Does she want to die? The girl embarrassedly applied. She apologized and said the training would be done again. Conti agreed, and MC stood puzzled and thought. Since the first day it was so tough, then conflict. We lay exhausted on the floor and still thanked the commander for the training. Training, the girl said she would train with Common tomorrow. The girl said, all right. Militaria was directly asked to prepare her sword. He promised her exactly that. A little later during dinner, one of the soldiers said, yes, the commander's training is still tough. Confi asked in surprise, did they see everything? The second guy replied, yes, they were hiding in the shadows, but she is really incredible. She is doing pretty well for her size. The girls asked shyly, really? They answered, yes, that's true. Confi frowned and muttered, there was no need to mention her size. The guys burst out laughing and asked, isn't it time for her too? Taking the dishes on a tray, she replied, yes, she needs to go. Her comrades took a towel, told Confi not to catch a cold, and put it on her head. Garrett thought about the girl and went to look for her. He found her on the training ground. Conti continued to train alone, doing sweeps, lunges, and spins. The main character stood and watched her. When she finished, the protagonist praised her enthusiastically, saying, well done, the girl exclaimed in surprise. Is that him? Him asked MC if she trains like that. So late, replied Conti, yes, she does it every day. Today she wanted to catch up with the commander at least a little. She dreamed of being like her. Darrett noticed that, of course, Military was pushing her hard and he was worried, so he came. She came to check on her. The girl replied, he is a good person. The main heroine said, it's just care. Is she against it? Exclaimed Conti. Of course not. He made such a flawless sword out of her that she could not allow it to break. It's just a wonderful sword. Its sound is like quiet rumbles of thunder that awaken something unknown in her. The main character looked at her puzzled. The girl asked if something was wrong. Wrong? He replied that he disturbed her, so he would go back. Confi, embarrassed, said, all right, and wished the master G. Good night to you. MC, turning back, remembered that. An admiring smile blossomed on the girl's face. It was hard to believe she liked the sword. He made so much. When was the last time his work pleased someone so much? It was so serious that he decided he would have to work with Kamina. After 4 days, Nana Hikari asked his student Gilmas, why does the sword of rank A and no element? It was a sturdy rank A sword, completely without any element such as sword the boy held. The boy blushed and said that processing S-rank materials is difficult. Hards, Nana Hikari sharply pointed him to the exit and shouted angrily, he doesn't want to know anything. Let him go. Gilmas was already about to ask about the pain. He demanded payment, but the Duke's son glanced at him, put the sword to him, and asked, will he pay with his life? Gilmas disappeared as if in a gust of wind. She suddenly tore away and rushed away. After that, Nana Hikari turned to Ajin and told her to call Detroit. Troy, the girl replied that she understood and left. Soon a huge, gloomy man approached him. He asked if the master had called him. It was none other than the mercenary. Detroit, the Duke's son, told him everything. His tea swallowed everything and summarized, that's how it is. He still failed to create an S-rank sword. The bruiser replied that rank does not matter. Importance, with any sword he could defeat anyone. The young man grabbed a thick iron rod and bent it with his bare hand. Waving his hands and said, like this, he threw the bent rod. From the side, Nana Hikari was watching the trajectory of the object. He thought it immediately became clear he cannot lose. It was almost too easy, but that was actually better. He asked Aiden not to tell the parents about this. The maid promised so. He pondered after his words. Finally, the day of the duel had come. Arrived, Nana Hikari rudely greeted his opponent, calling him or. The old man, the main character, noticed that they had not seen each other for 5 days, and the Duke's son sarcastically praised him as if for not running away. Missing everyone is surprised. He watched the arena intently. The host announced, Lord Nana Hikari versus Lord Dyert. Directly duel of the blacksmiths. All present began to whisper, is this the destroyer? Detroit, is it really him? Just look at Confi. The sword Militaria was wildly outraged. This is indisputable. An equal fight, thought the main character, that's for sure. Hikari, smiling, said, it is immediately clear that the sword is a fake. The announcer continued, whose sword will break first and also who steps beyond the boundary. Whoever ends up outside the arena loses. The military were outraged again. These rules are unfair. Minahikari snorted disdainfully. Iber exclaimed with a sneer, this trifle is his opponent. Confit only gripped the sword hilt tighter. The host gave. Signal for the duel was given. The mercenary sh. Harry screamed and swung his weapon so hard that it released a powerful shockwave. He managed to stay on her feet but still took a step forward. Forward, everyone present shouted in surprise at Detroit's attack. From that force she was almost thrown back. The mercenary rushed to attack the girl, but Confit cold-bloodedly dodged everything. He unleashed all his attacks. The opponent shouted angrily that she couldn't run forever. He cornered the opponent forever and shouted joyfully, no more. Nowhere left to run. A commotion arose among those present, and someone screamed hysterically, he can't watch this. The mercenary. He asked the opponent if she should just surrender. Minder, Confit answered decisively, she will never do that, said Detroit. He spoke grimly. He warned her, now she will regret her decision. He radiated menace. Ominous aura. Confit looked at him and thought her commander taught her and Mr. Darrett forged Kamina's sword just for her. Mercenary swung the sword and shouted, just don't die. The girl answered decisively, she was not going to lose. Detroit struck amid the worried cries of the spectators, but Confit parried and even more. Something incredible happened. A fragment of that mercenary's sword flew off and the spectators' exclamation and confusion. Destroyer's sword shattered into pieces and the main hero was confused. Had he overdone it with the sword? The sword, the commentator announced with admiration, crowns the winner. Militari turned to the main hero and exclaimed joyfully, it worked. He smiled and added, yes. Yes, it happened. The military approached the girl and praised her. With a depressed look, he trudged heavily towards the surprised Nanahari. The Duke's son froze, stunned and speechless. The main character addressed him and reminded him that since he promised that from now on he would take his work seriously. Nana Hikari cut him off roughly and angrily, saying, she told him, shut up, don't talk to him. He was leaving this damn army, let them all. And then it was very bad. He wanted to sue everyone. The agent looked at him piercingly. He wanted to shout something else, but she suddenly slapped him on the back, surprising everyone, then bowed to the military and others. She apologized for the young master and added that she would scold him well and awaken common sense in him. Detroit also got it full. They left subdued before the opponent. Returning home, Nana Hikari exploded again, yelling at the main character he will not forget this. Forgive this idiot. Then he turned his attention to the mercenary and angrily asked what he was paying him for. Detroit B. Court began to make excuses, saying he was retiring, that he lost to a little girl, and that he was too weak, addressing. He said he was leaving to live in peace. Farewell, everyone. Nana Hikari grew even more enraged. He shouted at the mercenary that he was a worthless bastard. And he turned to again and shouted, now her. It was her turn. She is a true traitor. She raised her hand to the mask. Master, the girl replied, then she will admit that she hit him, he muttered. Yes, let her do that. When she was leaving, she, by the way, said that he used. He put S-level materials into play, and the destroyer lived in the mansion. He told his parents about it, and now it's goodbye for him. The maid left. He rushed after her, shouting, but she promised. Promise not to tell. He will release her at that very moment. The threatening voice of the father sounded, angrily shouting his name, and the boy turned to see angry parents before him. His father shouted fiercely. He used materials without permission that they had prepared for sale in another country. His mother screamed, is he trying to ruin their family's reputation? Does he even understand what he is doing? Nana Hikari tried to justify himself, but his father suddenly interrupted him. When he was told that he was being expelled, he froze, looking at his parents, and completely confused them. While everyone was laughing as he was already leaving, the father ordered the guards to take him to Tamon on F. In the forest, the guards grabbed Nana Hikari and dragged him to the exit. Exit, he shouted for them to stop. No, not this, but no one listened. He called for his parents, but they didn't even turn around to look at him. After some time, they left him in the forest. It was already late, and the forest seemed eerie and frightening to him. And he heard sounds and screams everywhere. Scared, he began waving his hands and shouting at invisible, imaginary enemies. What do they want? Let them all go. Go away, he thought, almost in tears, surrounded by monsters and abandoned. Thrown in the middle of the forest, all because of Dyert. He envied him so. So he decided to challenge him to a duel. Why did it happen? Wasn't he just more honest? At that moment, the soldier said. He quietly admitted that this duel was worthy, as if she were experienced. The girl shyly thanked the experienced soldier and added that she won thanks to the two of them. Of them, the protagonist said with a smile that he just made the sword. At that moment, her main contribution belonged only to her. At that moment, her comrades loudly called the girl and invited her to celebrate her victory. Convai said goodbye. She said goodbye to the mentors and rushed to her friends, thanking the commander and the protagonist once again. When she ran up to her comrades, they competed to see who would praise her louder and congratulate her on the victory. The soldier smiled and said, "This day still." This became the beginning of her brilliant career. The main character agreed with her. All the soldiers lined up and filled with admiration began chanting "Old," meaning Derrit, Confidern. She turned around and looked at her mentors. Militaria shouted to the soldiers, "From today." Since then, the main character became the new blacksmith of there. The brave army thought the main character. He thought, of course, they would call him Old. Soon in the Kingdom of the Groves in the palace in the dungeon, Senji heard a sound. Sinon screamed to be released. They held him like a monkey. He won't get away that easily. They did not answer his questions. Guards irritably asked him what the hell he was talking about. Let him sit quietly. Quietly, the emissary sighed heavily and thanked the guards for their efforts. Senji started unlocking. Lock on the cage door that holds. He grabbed the guild master and ordered him to come out. Soon, a whole line of soldiers formed near the blacksmith of the main character to their surprise, one of the warriors told the main character that. And so, thanks to his repair, wielding the sword became much easier. The other two asked him to fix another sword. Sword and backpacks, the main character asked them to wait a little, everyone in turn, everyone at once. Instantly calming down, he waited patiently. MC warily plopped into the chair. The soldiers noticed the weapon on the wall and They began to admire its beauty. Everyone immediately started arguing over who would get Common's sword at that moment. At that moment, Confi, entering the forge, cheerfully exclaimed, "She won't lose either." She was to become the true mistress of this sword. One of the soldiers noticed the plaque under the weapon and read what was written there. She would have to perform an S-level feat. Confi replied, "It is. That's how it is when you are a commander." For example, when they defeated one of the 4 demon kings, Derrit, hearing this, exclaimed in surprise, "Militara defeated the demon king?" They answered, "Yes, she is simply incredible. She is a true heroine." He thought he liked the very idea to perform such feats with the sword he forged. The soldiers continued the conversation. "Derrit created Kamina. He is simply incredible, and I want to become that cool old guy." The main character quietly laughed, wondering if they still called him old. He got up from clear the table and announced that he has finished work for today. Let them return tomorrow. The crowd began to line up in advance. At that moment, the police Militaru approached them smiling and said to the main character, "Great job, he was busy all day." The latter replied that it turned out there was more work here than in Ratoni. He was finally satisfied. The girl laughed and said she was glad to hear that. Thanks to him, the soldiers changed too. Everyone wanted to use Kamina, and they decided to take training seriously. Seriously, MC smiled and said that it was the best. The highest praise for a blacksmith. He sincerely thanked them for everything. She sadly added that she was very sorry that Her Majesty had limited him. He remarked, "Let him complete equipment and repairs as needed." "Was it so?" the military man replied. "Yes, indeed," said Dur. "No problem, he understands everything. Weapons like Kamina cannot be everywhere." And was in everyone's hands. The girl looked at him with admiration and said, "By the way, I came for an important conversation. Her Majesty wanted to meet with him. Should I escort him to the palace?" Alice, the main heroine, surprised and confused at the same time, asked, "Right now?" "Now," the military man replied. "Yes, right now," he exclaimed, confused. "So why?" the girl remarked. "Of course, thanks to his contribution, the overall motivation of their soldiers was raised. It was a great achievement." The protagonist was puzzled. The queen wants to see a common person. What should he do? Stammering from excitement, he asked the girl which exactly. "What is she like, this queen?" She paused for a moment and then he briefly said, "She is very strict. Her name was Serenade Glossa." At that very moment, the queen was informed about what happened to her sword. Serenade pondered, "Lord," and they brought her Matsurugi. Broken, Senji grimly informed her that this man, Sinon, deceived him, but he could not understand that this guildmaster. He failed, so he was ready to take responsibility. The guildmaster himself knelt before him, his ex. On her face was an expression of complete devotion. Serene told her messenger that he was wrong. The boy replied that he was ready to accept his punishment. She hit him with a whip and shouted in irritation. He knows perfectly well that she does not tolerate people who fail. Now she will beat him even harder. Senji agreed. Sinon's eyes widened in surprise and he exclaimed, "What's happening?" Then the queen turned her attention to him and shouted, Now it was his turn." She hit him even harder and screamed, "He is trapped." Trash, the guildmaster who broke his country's treasure. The leader screamed in pain that pierced him through. Body, with every blow she forced him to admit his incapacity. The guildmaster shouted at the top of his lungs, begging for mercy. Serenade angrily told him that he would no longer be the guildmaster. She started hitting him again and he screamed hysterically. Why? After some time, the protagonist stopped in front of the throne room door the militarists told him that they needed. It's time to go. Was he ready for this? He muttered that he would need at least a year to prepare. His heart was. His heart almost jumped out of his chest. She said, "Good joke, but don't worry. Everything will be fine. Her Majesty is kind to those who know how." The allies entered and fell to their knees before the queen. She praised them. Well done for coming. She was glad to see them. The militia. The soldiers told her that she had brought exactly that blacksmith to her. The main character raised his head and said in a trembling voice that he was Darrett. Those Serenade smiled and said that he is the wonderful blacksmith who created Kamana and Shinmu. She extended her hand to him and added that she considers him the best blacksmith in the country. MC thought he had lost his mind and at the same time was recovering. Covering himself, he bowed to the queen and said that it was an honor for him. Serenade continued he had to deal with Nana Hikari himself. She had other matters, so she could not intervene. She apologized for that. Her gaze clouded. The protagonist responded in surprise. What is this, Your Majesty? Her eyes were not clouded. They were beautiful like precious stones. The queen smiled contentedly and said that he was not only a skilled blacksmith but also a true heartbreaker. The protagonist was terribly embarrassed by her words. He continued, today she called him for an important matter. Amatsurugi broke down. He asked, stunned and surprised, Amatsurugi Serena. Dawned on Serenade, did he really forget that this sword is Amatsurugi? Guards placed a table before him. On it lay the sword. He remarked in surprise and apologized. After all, he was seeing such a beautiful sword for the first time. The queen said in confusion, and the aristocrat admired it every day until one day the sword changed. Eventually he decided to sacrifice. To give it to the states. The main character thought in confusion, another evolution to S rank. How could he repair a sword that? He did not remember this. He looked at the queen and thought that she was very strict. No, but is that his job? Darrett apologized and said he did not remember that sword, and she, stunned, asked if he really created such a beautiful sword from. Without even noticing it, she laughed and said what an interesting man he was. This embarrassed him a little, and he wondered what kind of aristocrat is this. She constantly admired the sword. It seemed she was not angry about it. She said she wanted to. They asked him to repair Amatsurugi. He looked withdrawn. She stared intently at the broken sword and began to ponder it, and she waved her hand to the side, and Sinon found herself. They were thrown this. They were stunned by the fact that, from what they saw, and she said that it was this idiot. He is the one who broke the sword. Though she had a request, could he please take it as a student? He got angry about it and stood up sharply. Standing up, he loudly and sharply told Her Majesty to wait a moment. You can't. You won't learn anything from this worthless freak, she said loudly and displeased that he was. You're a worthless freak. It would be better if he listened to a wise person. Regarding that person, she calmed down a bit and said that one of her subordinates would watch over him. It was him. His name was Senji. He came out to them and, smiling a little, said that he said he wouldn't let him cause trouble, so don't worry. He understood that you can't refuse the queen and said he would do everything she wished. He said she was looking forward to his success. Four people left the hall and the main character exhaled. He stretched his back and admitted that he was so nervous. Maybe we should return to the hotel. Militer turned to him. I called him and asked where he was staying. He calmly replied that he was spending the night at the Eastern District Hotel. Senji said he could stay at the National Guard dormitory but refused the offer. He refused the offer and said he stayed at a cozy tavern. In that case, he asked for permission to be escorted. Later, they arrived at the Eastern District, and he said it was an inn. They went inside. He called Dell and said he had returned. She happily returned to him and said, you finally came back. He was late and she had already started to worry. The military became very. She got terribly angry and shouted that she had also lived here. From today she is here. With a slightly puzzled look, she agreed and immediately said she would prepare the room. She stopped, called him, and asked, what will be first today, bath or dinner? He said that since she would be here, dinner would be first. To be first? Sinon, with an angry look, loudly asked why only he was being pampered here. He would Sinon. He was supposed to stay here too. Senji got very angry about this, kicked him, and shouted loudly that no one would let him live here. She apologized and said that they currently had no free rooms, only stables left. Because of this, he got even angrier, grabbed him by the ear and told him to calm down. They had to leave. He He loudly, with a dissatisfied tone, asked, "Is he a guildmaster? Are they mocking him?" This made him even angrier at that person. He grabbed him and loudly declared that he was a former guildmaster. They were a bit confused, and Dell went to another room and said they should wait a bit. MC agreed. Militer called the teacher. He turned to her and she asked if he had plans for tomorrow evening. He said no, and she said with a joyful smile. Their faces were glowing. They knew they would be alone in the evening. The next day they both met several workers and greeted them. One of them said, "They said that Nanakihari had fired them, but now they were happy to return. They hadn't seen the commander for a long time," looked away, and said that it turns out others can be like him too. Who could break the national treasure? Shouldn't they be executed for that? He was lucky that their queen was Merciful God, Senji called him and said it was time to start repairing Amatsurugi. The worker opened a bag with many different precious stones and asked him to use them. He hid those materials from Nana Hikari. It was easier for him to use them, and everyone would be happy that way. And if only you had fixed Matsuragi with this thing, it would have been a great honor. Darrett looked over the materials, praised them enthusiastically, and said he could work with them, and the worker called him and asked if he was not. He didn't even object. Let him see how it works. Other workers also asked, and he allowed it, and then he placed the broken sword on the table and thought, what a wonderful sword this is, truly well made. Will he be able to surpass his former self? Everyone looked at him with admiration. He was filled with enthusiasm and waited for it to start working. He put on gloves and thought that he shouldn't think about it too much. A little later he made a kite Amatsuragi, and the surprised workers loudly said that it turned out that he was a genius blacksmith. How did he manage to fill it with a sacred element? Was it because he struck the hammer diagonally? She asks to be taught blacksmithing. Militara happily called the teacher and said that he turned out to be very popular. She was very proud. She was proud to know him. He, looking a little embarrassed, said she shouldn't exaggerate. He noticed Sina. A man with a very displeased look called him and said that first he needed to work on how he used the hammer. He said loudly and angrily that he should. He didn't need to be given orders. Senji hit him hard on the head and loudly exclaimed that he shouldn't behave so arrogantly. He fell to the ground and he began kicking him. At the table on which the metal lay, the protagonist handed him a hammer and told him to try to hit the sheet of metal. He must be careful not to hit his finger. He grabbed it. He tore the hammer from him and clicked his tongue in dissatisfaction. He sharply swung his hand and hit with the hammer with all his might. He hit his finger so hard right on the head. Everyone was surprised by this. When around, he fell to the ground, rolled on the floor, and howled loudly in pain. He approached him and asked in a concerned tone if everything was all right, then waved the hammer in front of his head, loudly shouted not to come closer, and declared that he didn't need his pity. Senji tore the hammer from him and loudly said that it was not allowed to swing it like that. He looked at the workers loudly discussed it. He said that they must not look down on him. Later they came to the tavern and said that the time had come. Time to celebrate the master's appointment. Mugs with alcohol in the mill. Soldier frowning asked why. But then were Dell and Confai also there. He said that he invited them, and the blacksmiths and soldiers were there too. This angered her and she sent someone started drinking from her mug, and this worried her. She called the commander and said that it was not worth drinking everything at once. After that she took out 2 of his dolls, the 25th and the 40-year-old versions. She began playing with these dolls, which this surprised him greatly. The workers looked at this and asked, "Another doll now? Really?" She made a new doll. Confei said that from now on she would play like that and until lights out. It would have been better if they had just left her. He took a sip of alcohol from the mug and thought that somehow the image of a serious commander ceased to exist. It was only in his head. Dell called and said she heard it from her. He confessed to her that he had participated in a duel of blacksmiths. She thanked him and he said he was just doing his job. She said he should not be modest, and thanks to his sword, she managed to defeat a man of incredible strength. He objected and said that it was all thanks to her training. Confit thought for a long time, called him and asked if he would make himself a weapon. He was embarrassed by this. He said he was not an adventurer, and Militaria asked why he should not be an adventurer. It is not allowed to do this. If he used his own weapon, everyone around could be wiped out. He clearly saw her quality. He pondered. And the next day it seemed that it made sense. They came to the smithy, and she said that this gentleman would forge weapons for himself. He would need them to defend himself. Barrett said that actually, if he learned to wield weapons, they could better master blacksmithing. People said it was a good idea. The idea flashed in his head. They could barely see his weapons. They, the soldiers, would teach him to use weapons. He thanked them, and a very dissatisfied sign loudly asked to wait and inquired. They completely forget about him. It's unfair. He needs weapons. Such a thing could happen, why was only he allowed this? Because of this, Senji threw him onto the table, called him an idiot, and said he should learn to use a hammer. Later they reached the gloss armor warehouses. He began to pick various materials and praised them with a cheerful voice. She asked, when he used only level materials, he could use them, no one would object. He refused and said that the lower rank ones were enough. These materials are better left to the soldiers, right? This touched her. She called him a teacher. Teacher said that he was a wonderful person. He, a little puzzled, laughed and said that she was exaggerating. He took everything he needed. They returned to the forge and the soldiers asked what he would forge, an axe or a magic staff. He said he didn't know, but hundreds of ideas swarmed in his head. Militara suggested forging a sword and said she could teach him how to wield it. He thought it all over and realized he wasn't sure if it was a good idea. He put on gloves and said, I'd better make a hammer. They were stunned by this and he asked, blacksmith. Blacksmiths often use that, right? The hammer would be more familiar to him. He was used to swinging a hammer for years. It would be easier to use the hammer as a weapon, and they understood him. They said that was exactly what they expected from him. Later he finished making a big hammer and it surprised everyone who watched very much. He, satisfied with his weapon, said that all that was left was to give it a name. She happily said she had an idea, and the soldiers were sure she would choose a good name. She suggested naming the hammer after him and asked what he would think about that. The main character thought it was bad name, but the soldiers said it was cool. Cool name, short and clear. He really wanted to refuse. Although he had different views, he saw how they looked at him and still agreed. He thought about the main thing. The main thing is that they are happy because of it, and the system reported it. That his hammer had rank S, the element holy, and if you connect mathematics, if you turned magical power into a hammer strike, its strength would be equal to the power. In a few weeks, in the second training zone, a meteorite crashed from the sky. He swung the hammer and the soldier shouted to him, you're already doing pretty well at this. He got down to business. He thanked him, took a combat stance and said that it is very important to lower the hammer at the right moment for strike. He needs to be careful because he was especially vulnerable after strike. He repeated after him and said that unlike a sword, it can also be used. It was used as a shield. He needs to practice defense. He turned his thoughts to the past and thought. He remembered how at the beginning of the training his body did not obey and he barely moved, but now everything was much better. He was getting better. He continued to train and the soldier said, keep it up. This MC continued swinging the hammer and fought with. He thought that after all, his blacksmith experience did come in handy with the hammer. Rolling turned out to be easier than he thought. They decided to take a break. He sat under the tree and took a deep breath. Otter approached him and said that he tried very hard now. He almost has no free time. Now, after all this work and training, and all thanks to him, all the soldiers, they were glowing with happiness and gladly spent time with him. He was glad. It was nice to hear that. I looked at her and wondered if she still carries his doll. With the dolls with her, she decided to sit next to him. Someone addressed him and he raised his eyes and thought, by the way, if you think about it, these days were so eventful. If not for her letter, he doesn't know how his life could have turned out, as if he had just discovered something completely new. New world, if only everything had continued like that. Suddenly a soldier ran up to them and shouted loudly that something bad happened. He had a message. He called. They called the commander. She stood up, approached him, and loudly asked what was happening. He continued. He was breathing heavily and said that steel bears were seen in the forest, special monsters. Stone trees, these were rank monsters. People suddenly started grabbing their things and running in all directions, and he shouted her name and when asked what kind of monsters they were, she said that she did not. I haven't explained this yet, in simple terms, reconnaissance and aggressor. The aggression of these monsters was much higher than usual. He said it was the first time when he had heard about special monsters. She said they were very rare and simply hated people. They attacked them. They rushed at them as soon as they saw them. He was worried about this and she turned to him and very shyly asked him, but couldn't he please go with her? He was very surprised by what he heard and couldn't understand why she needed it. Later they approached the soldiers and she loudly said what they had already heard. In the forest of stone trees, steel bears suddenly appeared. Their feature is steel armor, aim where it is not. Without armor, materials that drop after killing them can be used to create weapons. And he will go with them. Dur said it was a great opportunity. To check what he had learned, he gladly took on the job. To work with them, they approached the carts and she loudly said that the bodies of these monsters are very tough, ordinary attacks. They are unlikely to reach them. Let them remember this in a few hours. Later, when it began to get dark, they reached the forest of stone trees. Militaire loudly exclaimed that They decided to split up and look for the bear. The soldiers agreed and saw. Scattered in different directions, she said that it was. It was also time for them to set off. They walked through the dark forest, and the frightened Confi said that real trouble was coming. The fight would have been much scarier. He turned to her and said that he himself was also a bit nervous. They had nothing to fear, the commander was nearby. He agreed with this and looked around and added that they also had 2 holy weapons with them. Teacher's hammer and her sword. This monster ignores any damage except holy damage, and the only weapon with a holy element is the weapon he crafted. The former blacksmith made weapons from. He tried with the same materials but nothing worked out. That's why here is. A line of people stretches to see the teacher. He smiled and said this means that to win. To defeat them, only a weapon with a holy element is needed. She agreed, and Confi said it was good that they had. At it, they heard some sounds. Looked at. Turning aside, he saw several goblins approaching them. Because of this, they were terribly scared, screamed loudly in fright, and shouted that they would be eaten. The villager looked at them and said that there are 5 of them maybe in your. Nearby, he took a fighting stance and asked if they were F. He could fight but refused, picked up a stone from the floor and said. He said that if they feel threatened they will run. He threw a stone at their side and the weapons flew out of the hands of 3 goblins. Goblins surfaced and they immediately ran away. However, the rest of the goblins rushed at them, which terribly frightened Confi, and she loudly. He proudly said that they should stand behind her. The hero stepped forward, performed a powerful strike with his hammer, pushed them aside and they immediately ran. He ran into the forest and sadistic thoughts swarmed in his head. A satisfied expression on his face, as if it was the result of his urge. During training, they could hardly believe their eyes. What happened stunned them. He joyfully said that he was incredible. He gained such strength in just a few weeks, it was incredible. He thanked them and they were already about to move on, but suddenly they heard a loud sound that instantly caught their attention. He asked loudly and anxiously, what was that? Militaria began to look around and shouted loudly that they must not allow there. They lost vigilance. She noticed something and loudly, desperately warned them of danger, and at that very moment, something huge flew past them every moment, and each time it amazed them. Secretly, she turned to him and loudly. They asked if he was okay. He agreed and she rushed to her, loudly called the captain and sincerely thanked her. He was thanked. She turned her gaze aside and loudly shouted that they needed to be careful. They saw it. A huge bear emerges from behind the trees. He was very surprised by its size and thought so. This is a steel bear. Bear, she loudly called Confi and said that she must act, and immediately agreed. He whistled to attract the attention of the soldiers nearby. Militaria, with a stern look, said that she would fight. She drew a sword, pronounced its name, and rushed into battle. She took a fighting stance and said she was ready to fight. They froze in surprise when they noticed that her sword was. She shone and began to move with such a crazy speed that it seemed to them as if she disappeared. It means she used a divine flash. Skilled Flash ran up to the monster and dealt a very powerful sword strike. She looked at the monster that was standing frozen in place and loudly asked, did it really not work? But Str. Strike was incredibly powerful. Suddenly the bear grabbed a huge tree and uprooted it. He uprooted it and this amazed her incredibly. He swung it very hard and threw large stones at them. She watched this with a serious expression and stopped them with her sword. He was surprised because she deflected all the flying stones. Pebbles and Confi praised the captain with a joyful look. Militaire said in a serious tone that it was still too early. It's too early to rejoice. After all, special monsters they have very high intelligence. The bear ran to them. He shouted loudly that he changed tactics. He took a fighting stance. Look at this with a tense facial expression. And loudly said that she could do it. They pounced. They attacked simultaneously and he stopped her sword. He held the sword with his teeth. She was so surprised and she couldn't pull the sword back. Confi noticed something and shouted loudly to the captain and told her, be careful. The bear swung its huge paw. And MC got scared and rushed to them. He powerfully struck the monster's stomach with a hammer. He threw it aside. She thanked him in surprise and he said that it was still too early to relax. Confi ran away from them and said fearfully that she would call another soul. Soldiers, she turned to her with anxiety in her eyes and loudly told her that she froze and could not move. She and the monster simultaneously rushed at her. At that moment the monster hit her hard with its paw, but she managed to defend herself faster. He covered her with his body and got wounded. This worried him a lot, and after this attack they rolled several meters on the ground. She was terribly upset about this, loudly called the captain and immediately began to apologize. Militara stood up despite the injured leg and said that she needed to calm down. Not everything was completely bad. He looked at them with anxiety in his eyes and did not know what to do. Help clearly would not come anytime soon, so now he had to protect them both, or rather, he even had to do it, and the bear noticed. Noticing him, they began to stare at each other. Another, and he noticed a small black light that it immediately caught his eye. He thought, is it the same as with flow? Material defects, does he notice those areas where something is wrong? No wrong, I see, it looks like materials. The monster swung its paw through a pile of stones toward him and he defended himself with the hammer and thought that those were weak spots. He swung his huge paw and let out a loud roar. He looked at it and with a worried expression, loudly called the teacher. The roar swung with a serious expression on his face and thought that he would put all his magical power into this hammer. He struck very strong blow. A powerful explosion sounded and after it, a huge crater remained. Stunned by what had happened, he thought, what just happened? She approached him, called the mentor, and asked if everything was all right. He agreed with a puzzled voice as if any moment now. She wanted to say something, began to descend into the crater, and asked if he really remembered nothing. She helped him. She helped him to his feet and whispered that during the attack this place was literally bathed in light. He asked in surprise. That's why there was this hole here. She helped him get out of the crater. He himself said he couldn't believe it. He stood up and Confide immediately rushed to him, hugged him, and loudly exclaimed how glad she was that he was alive. He apologized with a slight smile for making her worry. She heard loud sounds. She looked at them with a smile and said she would handle the security. They approached the crater, looked closely and asked, what kind of powerful blow is needed to destroy the earth? Only pieces remained from the iron bear, like a meteorite. The meteorite fell right here. She stroked her head and smiled a little, lost in thought. The main thing is that everyone remained safe. A few days later, Militaria called the teacher and asked how he was feeling. He sat down on a chair and sighed, saying that his bones still hurt but he would survive. And her? He quietly replied that she had almost recovered. He looked at her with a slightly dissatisfied expression and thought how good it is to be young. He, by the way, asked, the stone forest is guarded now, isn't it? She looked at him confusedly and asked why he decided so. He trembled with fear and asked, maybe he should compensate them for destroying everything there, right? She froze in surprise when she realized his thought. He pondered, laughed, and asked what he was talking about. This place will become a reminder for future generations about his incredible strength. He was very surprised by this, and she said with a joyful smile that now he was called the Punisher. He was very dissatisfied with this nickname. Decided to change the subject and said that it was quite noisy outside. It seems everyone was in a fighting mood today. They went outside and saw soldiers diligently training and shouting loudly, want to become a master, give 200, start from the very beginning, 1,000 push-ups. He cheerfully said that his legs left an unforgettable impression on everyone. Kanfei also trained. She noticed them, greeted them, and sincerely said that she was grateful for his hard work. She called the commander and said that they were now running around the territory, their goal, 10,000. The number of laps he heard shocked him, and Militaire said with a smile that such training was very exhausting, but from time to time it was worth doing. A little later, Conf ran up to them again, called the commander, and eagerly asked if she had already run all the laps. She denied it. Suddenly it said that a guest had arrived from Glossamagic Academy. She was surprised by that. And then a girl approached them, called him by name, and said that they had not seen each other for a full 15 years. The main character was quite surprised and wondered who she was at all. Earlier, after Nano Hikari was expelled, Sitsa went down to the basement, knelt down, and the creature in the mirror called her an agent and asked how their plan was progressing, and she replied that their plan had failed. A master blacksmith named Dyert became the only blacksmith of the Gloss army. They say the failure was undeniable. Unacceptable, she expressed regret, and it coldly replied that despite this, she was an important pawn, so it would give. He gave her another chance. She gratefully thanked for this generosity, and the creature disappeared into the mirror and said not to waste it. That moment he, embarrassed, asked, who is she? She got very angry because of this, smiled, called. He called him and said that her name was Izu. This surprised him. He suddenly remembered something and said that they once played together long ago. She gladly took his hand and agreed. She read and said that she was very glad to meet him. She thought about so many knew about him. The militarist stood between them. They grabbed her by the hand and asked if she could leave him alone. The teacher was very tired. She looked her over, called her commander, and with a sly smile said she treated the master like a toy. Small child, she got very angry because of this and said she said that she constantly wondered when they would have to settle the score with her. It seemed the time had come. He began to get nervous and asked if they both could calm down. What brought her here? Brought her here, she immediately approached him, recalling this, and said she needed his advice. At that moment a man approached them, loudly called her Supreme Master, and barked, who the hell is this? She turned to him, called him the deputy, and said that this man was the chief blacksmith of the Shining Army. He looked embarrassed and said he was glad to meet him. He shouted loudly and angrily that this was a vile lie. That scruffy old man is the chief blacksmith. It even sounds ridiculous. She told him not to get personal. He asked with a sly smile if she dared to contradict him. When he returns, he will talk to her alone. The soldier looked at him very displeased, called him over and said he must immediately retract his words. She could personally vouch for his skills. He gladly addressed her as commander and said she looked beautiful today as always and that he was very glad. Glad to see her today. The main character looked at him with disgust and thought, who is this disgusting old man? Doesn't he realize how he looks from the outside? Genon approached them, loudly called him and said displeased that he did everything as he was told, but the tools still broke. Everyone turned to him and Senji apologized to him, saying that he had done it. He made sure the tools were safe, but there was no time to finish because Baha approached them, called the blonde, and he turned to him and asked what he needed. He happily said that such a wonderful guy, he couldn't believe he was sitting in this wilderness. Everyone was shocked and he asked what he should say. Say this, would he like to work for him as a special instructor? Dinan, shocked by this proposal, threw away her broken arm. He grabbed a hammer and loudly declared that he had known from birth he was a genius. He stood nearby. Someone stood nearby and said that they needed to return to school and complete all the necessary documents. Izu excited. She got worried, called him and asked him to wait, and he said that upon returning he would wait for her in his room. Sign-on with a smug smile loudly called the protagonist's name and said that this is the difference in their abilities. He had no choice but to accept it. Immediately after that, they both teleported away. Someone left and those who remained headed to the army base conference room. Lhasa 3 sat at the table and he said that it would probably be difficult. Working with such a deputy is hard. She looks tired. He resigned, said he was right, and apologized for the commotion. She decided to drop the subject and asked, by the way, she was appointed supreme mistress, right? She should be proud of that. About herself, she said with a joyful smile that she achieved this only thanks to the staff he made. He was confused, remembered nothing, and she summoned the staff and told him to look at it. He took her staff. The staff and the system declared, this is the staff of the great mage Devondo, rank S. An attribute of light. He thought he did not remember creating such a staff. She said he made it for her. Long ago, indeed, the staff underwent many improvements. He wondered how it could be considered his creation. He looked at the creation, thinking about all the changes made to it. He returned the staff to. He approached her and asked what she wanted to consult about. She said that right now. The academy started courses on studying the holy attribute, so she wanted to ask him to make staffs with a holy attribute. He said with a slight smile that he could definitely help her with that. After this, she thanked him, and Militaria said that she also wants to study the saint attribute. Now she had no urgent matters. Could she watch how the lessons were going? Izu allowed her and said that later they should head to the academy. Right now, he apologized and said that he needed to take a hammer with him. Later, when he packed his things, they stood nearby. And she immediately cast the spell of instant teleportation and they instantly found themselves in the academy. In the garden of the academy, she smiled and said, welcome to the Glosso Academy of Magic. Her breath was taken away by the beauty of this place. She said with a joyful look that they should first greet the director. She entered the office and the girl with a smile said that she was glad to meet her. She was the director of this educational institution, Olna Glossa. Militaria told this lady that they had not seen each other for a long time, called her by name, and said she was glad to see her in good health. Dora introduced himself to her and said he was glad to meet her. She looked at him and said that she had heard. He created a staff with a holy property and hopes that it will help her students in researching this holy property. Sign, Izu pointed at her and said that the director belongs to Her Majesty. Their resemblance surprised him, and he was already about to say something. She said that she is kind to those who perform their duties well and strict to the lazy. She eagerly awaited the results of his work. They left the office. He was very frightened after this meeting, and Izu said that next she would introduce them to the students. At that moment, Bei approached them, loudly called her, and shouted that he had said he would wait for her in his room when he returned. Why did she bring this misunderstanding with her? She wanted to say something. That thing, but with a displeased look, loudly called him and asked what was wrong with him. Old man. Mold was here. The protagonist grabbed his head and with a dissatisfied look. He felt like his head was about to burst. Bea grabbed her by the hand. She screamed loudly, and they both became very worried about her. She resisted, embarrassed, asked him to let go and asked what he was doing. He leaned towards her. His voice became threatening. What is wrong with you, Supreme Mistress? Is she resisting him? He got angry because of this, tore his hand away, and loudly exclaimed that it was only because he was the deputy. That did not give him any right to behave like that. He was outraged and loudly asked, "What kind of barbarism is this? He is one of the highest sages of the Gloss Academy. How is he not ashamed?" he asked in a dissatisfied tone. "It seems he is not going to. So he has to stop doing what she doesn't like, right?" He anxiously said that he understood everything. "It's time to let him go." He was rushing down the corridor, waved with a smile, and said he advised him to leave. "Run away before it becomes too late." He also rushed down the corridor and shouted loudly that he should listen to his advice. As soon as they left Militaria with anxiety, with a worried look, they asked how she was feeling. The protagonist was also worried about her and said that they urgently need to tell the director everything. They will tell her everything they saw and support her. Sighed, Izu awkwardly hid her displeasure and said that she was very grateful to them, but she was fine, she was already used to it. They were already used to it. Both were puzzled, and she immediately switched and said with a joyful smile he was supposed to introduce them to the students. She was sure they would like them. They were in this classroom. They were supposed to follow her. They entered the classroom and she told the students that she had asked. She called out to get their attention. She wanted to introduce them to the creator of her staff. She introduced him and he said. He greeted them and the students asked if he had assembled this team of teachers. He was old and looked not very well. He was a bit confused and thought that he completely agreed with them. She said that this gentleman had created many sacred weapons, including even the hammer he himself uses his creation. He also forged a sword for the general commanding the Gloss army. Militara stepped forward and He showed her shining sword with a satisfied smile. The students were surprised by this. One of the female students raised her. She took her by the hand, called the teacher, and said that she really wanted to see with her own eyes how the weapon would be made so it would be easier for them to understand. Izu agreed with her, called him and asked, he wouldn't mind, right? There is a forge and materials here. He didn't even finish. He agreed and said that there is a school of magic here. Here he will create the staff. His words made the students very happy, and at the same time, in his office, a very dissatisfied man loudly insulted him. He could not forgive it, and loudly they asked how he dared to leave a wound on his hand, and this girl, how could she not accept him? His invitation. Simon stood nearby and asked what he wanted. He wanted him to do it. Remembering him, he said in surprise that for now he had done it. He did not need to do anything. He agreed, and with a self-satisfied smile, asked so could he prepare a spare set of clothes for him. It was necessary to consider his favorite brand, a masterpiece of the highest class, but where would he spend the night? He turned to him with a confused look, not understanding what had just happened. He said he assured that he would take care of the clothes himself. He could stay in a special guest room in the dormitory. He said with a very satisfied look that it was wonderful, exactly the attitude he deserved. Although he missed those days spent with the horses a little. Everything is fine. The main thing is that he is making new acquaintances. Aya, with a satisfied smile, said that it was right. He is sincerely grateful for the opportunity to meet with him. Again entered the office, called him, and said that he seemed to be in a great mood. He called her in a joyful voice, said that they were just waiting for her, and introduced her as his secretary. She bowed, and Sinan admiringly praised her beauty. He smiled slyly, thinking that only the school did not know about her. He had several reasons to hire her. She said that people who still could not those who thought they understood his greatness were deeply mistaken. He gladly agreed. She agreed and said that it should be so from her. He thought that she understood his value and was also clever. Smart and beautiful, the perfect girl. He wanted to hug her, called her to the bedroom, but she dodged and said that he needed to wait. When they finish this matter, she will fully give herself to him with her body. The longer the wait, the sweeter the reward. He began to leave with a satisfied smile and said that in that case they would have to sort it out. Deal with him quickly. She bowed and as always said this. He will instantly understand everything, and also using this opportunity. He also wanted to get rid of Darrett. They turned around, surprised. And while he was forging staffs, she said that he disgraced her master. This is the gravest sin, the only way. For this he must pay with his life. She said it was amazing. They will start preparations immediately. She said that everything is ready. She could see him off right now. He was very glad about this, after which they came to the dungeon and saw. Denon said that this room is quite spacious. Eigen said. He said that the day he becomes king will come very soon. He agreed and said that very soon she will become his queen. He stood next to them and thought that the interior here is really quite bad. He, smiling broadly, thought that he would capture this country. The role of some deputy school director did not suit him at all. He secretly manipulated the people of the Glossamagic Academy, organized a coup, and in the midst of chaos, ascended the throne without a drop of blood. All All this is thanks to the people from the academy. This is a perfect plan. She extended to him the dark power of rank S. Stone and said that this is exactly what she told him about. He happily took it and said, "They said how beautiful this stone is. The power of darkness is decisive." This fit into their plan. He thought that was the second reason why he hired her. He didn't even know where she got this power stone from, but for him she is. The goddess of salvation called him and said that he must destroy the stone, and the power of darkness will be. It must become his. He agreed, but just in case decided to play it safe. They call him and say, "You must use your amazing power," and shout, "Break this stone." Sinon, smiling happily, said he could rely on him. He took the sphere in his hands and began to squeeze it with his palms, and Aya looked at him with a mocking smile and thought he was an idiot. No brute force could destroy this. He destroyed the sphere with magic and darkness. Dark energy shot out from it. He watched this. Look at this from the side. Cast the spell of darkness absorption and find out. He thought that it needed to be absorbed into his body. After absorption, having absorbed all this dark energy, he exclaimed with a happy smile that it was incredible. Aging called him, smiling, and said that it was incredible. He looked at the sign and thought that it seemed it was better to just leave this fool as he was. The power of darkness was growing. Darkness must reign over all existence. He cast his control spell and began spreading it throughout the academy. Meanwhile, in the forge of the Magic Academy, the students began to ask which attribute suits the saint. He thought probably fire and lightning. The main character said that the holy attribute can do everything. It can also work on its own. Does anyone else have questions? He heard one of the students loudly fall to the floor. He rushed to him and asked how he was feeling. He tried to bring him to his senses, but suddenly he tried to attack him. They will attack him. This worried them terribly, and Isa loudly. He gently asked, "What is this black substance around?" She feels. This is a colossal amount of energy of the dark attribute. Latara anxiously and loudly asked, "Are they sure?" Surrounded, she stepped forward and loudly said, "They said that they should hide behind her now." She used "He is the holy barrier" spell, thanked her and said that she arrived just in time. She was standing next to him and loudly asked what happened to the students. She looked at them and said, "He said that their minds are under the power of darkness. These forces do not affect them thanks to the weapon with the holy attribute." With a thoughtful expression, he said that the fact that darkness and light are opposite properties sounds quite logical. She said that in this situation he is too frivolous. With all this, she will be able to help them. Militaria did not understand that she meant. Wasp put her hand on her shoulder and used the spell Sacred Image. She created many of her clones. It was she who stopped the students and said, "Give it back." If you take into account their physical training, her clones could tame the students, but to free their minds, the clones will have to destroy the students themselves. Source of dark energy, she cast a spell that sought the light and it covered everything. The entire academy. She focused all her strength on this spell and said she could do nothing. Something was blocking her magic. MC said that later they would just search as usual. They rushed down. He was rushing down the corridor, and Isa said that because of her weakness, she could not help them at all. But he still returned to her and whispered that it was not her fault. A soldier peeked around the corner and saw Sanin pressed against the wall and quietly whispered, "It seems the black magic did not affect him, and I do not feel the darkness at all." Dark energy hovered nearby. He quietly asked, "What is he doing by the wall?" She also asked quietly, "Is he bringing food to someone, perhaps to the one they are looking for?" They noticed a path. Suddenly a passage appeared in the wall and they decided to approach closer. They approached the wall. She asked how this could have happened. The militarist said it looked like an ordinary wall. She came closer, asked to look, and then used the holy revealing spell. She managed to open the passage, and in the wall, he said, surprised. "Exactly so as befits the Supreme Master." She turned to them and firmly said there was no doubt. What awaited ahead simultaneously controlled the minds of the students through. Bea ate his food and said that the steak for lunch was not wasted. Zainon was already about to ask about payment, but at that very moment, they approached them and loudly declared that they all must stand still. Izu asked, judging from with the help of dark energy, or was he controlling the minds of the students? Militara sharply called the deputy director and demanded that he immediately release the innocent students. He turned around with a displeased expression on his face. "Please look," he shouted, called him an idiot, and loudly asked why he did not notice that he was being watched. This angered him, and he loudly exclaimed that the fact that they really brought him food made him even angrier. Used the spell Arrow of Darkness and attacked him. She managed to react, rushed to him, and pushed him out of. About the attack, angrily he called him a useless idiot, and they said that there was nowhere to run. He must surrender right now. He got even angrier, began to concentrated black energy above his head, and loudly shouted that that he will take this country under his control. He took advantage of the darkness golems. They cast a summoning spell and loudly exclaimed that these are special golems, whom no one can easily defeat. They were defeated at the very moment they crossed the threshold of his dwelling. Soldiers with stone faces said that her sword could cut through any obstacle. She used a lightning speed. He cast a spell and struck the monsters with a powerful sword blow. Dairet rejoiced at this, and Izu called him and shouted loudly, "Look at this." Golems began to rise, and all this happened with the help of Black Energy, and Bea laughed, saying, "He told you so. You are such, no one could defeat them so easily." His children were strengthened thanks to dark magic. Their attacks meant nothing to them, she said with soup. They were stunned that these turned out to be golems rising after the blow. Impressed, what a pity, he watched this closely in It seemed to him as if he noticed the same black gleam as in FK. In the fight with the Iron Bear, he called out loudly. Turning to the two of them, he told them to aim at the eyes of the golem. He clicked his tongue, looking anxiously, and they scattered in different directions, loudly agreeing. Agreeing with him, he waved his hand, loudly. He loudly called his children and said that they must kill them. Girls used their skills and spells and defeat. The powerful attack, all the monsters in the room were defeated. Tax, the main character, rushed to the last target. The golem shouted loudly that now it was his turn. He hit the monster. He struck the monster's leg with a hammer so that it began to fall, then jumped up and hit it on the head. They dealt with these golden. He dealt with the golems quite easily, which surprised him greatly, and he asked in a puzzled voice. Confused look, how did they do it? They looked at him seriously. With serious faces, they told him to surrender because it will be better this way. It was his ambition that ruined him. He grabbed his head. His head spun and he whispered that it couldn't be he was. After all, he is the deputy director of the Magical Academy. His achievements and efforts could be wasted in vain because of some idiots. He would never give in to such idiots. Immediately after that, his body found itself in black energy covered him even more strongly, and his body began to be wrapped in chains. Everything changed. A horn grew and wings unfolded. He noticed that sharp claws grew, and he said it was incredible. He felt power flowing through his entire body. He looked at what was happening with surprise and asked, "What is he?" Izu said that the deputy director had fallen under the power of dark magic, and he transformed into a half-demon. He looked at them with a wide smile and said that now no one could stop him. He flew up and shouted that now this country, no, the whole world will fall before him. His legs, she realized that he was going to attack them and loudly warned them of the danger. Militar immediately sent. He stood before them and with her sword deflected the attack of his claws. Immediately after that, she used a skill. Heavenly Speed, Flight of Swallows, delivered S. He dealt several quick blows and pushed him away. She took advantage of the moment, aimed her staff at him and cast the spell Holy Strike. The spell, she shot at him with a wildly powerful wave of energy and threw him. Hit him against the wall. They already hoped that. But they managed, but unexpectedly. For their sake, he stood up and looking at them with a smirk. They asked in a surprised tone. He arrogantly asked why the sacred magic did not affect him. It seemed simple. His magic exceeded the power. Only their weapon, that's all. Around him, everything intensified again, and he shouted loudly. Izu looked at this and shouted loudly, causing the horn to start buzzing too. Something began to grow on his left side. If it continued, he would never be able to become human again. He would turn into a demon. He could cause irreversible damage to this academy. Militar loudly said they must stop him before he completely. Someone loudly said they didn't care whether they managed to keep him alive or not, and this made the main character worried, and he thought that he really didn't like the deputy as a person. He is a manipulator, rude. Many people suffered because of him, but he does not want that to become a real demon. He is a human, and as long as he is alive, he can always start over. Therefore, he does not want to end his life. He loudly called the girls' names and said, he said he wants to save the deputy. They were a little surprised and said that suits him perfectly. She agreed. They agreed they must save him. One powerful strike should be enough to stop the transformation process, fueled by loud wishes for their death, and she is loud. She shouted loudly that they need to surround him. He will try to immobilize him. The others. They instantly scattered in different directions, and he loudly agreed with her. She used sacred binding spell that shackled him with energy chains, and they instantly rushed in the direction. They rushed at him and swung their weapons using the double cut technique, striking him simultaneously, but he endured the blows, laughed, and said that they managed to get quite close to him. Yuzu noticed this. He was about to use magic and loudly warned them of the danger. He released a flash of darkness. First spell, and he broke free from the energy chains. She managed to summon the sacred shield. It deflected his attack and protected her friends. Dairet turned to her, thanking her for that, and he fell. He sharply flew up to the ceiling, looked at him, and said. He whispered that the darkness around him was too strong, he could not harm it at all. To him, she whispered that his magical powers had been replaced by demonic ones, which made his body weak. Weaker, because of this, the holy power did not affect him, her words. These words caught his attention, and he felt that everyone was watching only their clash. Two properties, but he can still see. Noticing even the slightest weakness, he looked him over and raised his voice. He wildly declared that the deputy's weakness is his heart. He angrily looked at him and said loudly. He loudly declared that he has no weaknesses. She used a light pillar. Spell of pillars that make Bayu dodge and loudly deck. Said that it is incredibly annoying. Militaria with a serious expression SW. He swung the sword, activated the skill Heavenly Moment, and dealt. Dealt several lightning-fast strikes. This allowed her to wound him. To strike in, they both shouted at him. Approached him and said that he must finish him off. Main hero swung his hammer. Rushed at him and thought that this would turn him into, again. He transformed into a human. He dealt a strong hammer blow. When the dust finally settled, they saw him as ordinary and said that the horns had disappeared, a transformation. He stopped. She was pleased about this. She approached him and said that, as befits a mentor. He dealt with him with one precise strike. He was puzzled. After that, they looked at Isa, called her, and asked if she was looking for something. For something, he began to walk around this room, heard some sound, and said that it seemed he had stepped on something. He picked up a black fragment and asked what it was. She immediately approached him, called loudly, and said that he should allow her to look at it. She took it from his hands and said that it was a fragment of a dark element stone. Ilatara approached her and asked why something like that was lying here. She said that. They said that probably because of this, the deputy almost turned into a demon. He surely knows something. And they can check it with magic at the very moment when the agent passed through. Through the forest walked with a dissatisfied look and thought. She felt that her plan had completely failed. Her plans were failing one after another. Even despite the special treatment this time, she will not manage to avoid punishment, and all because of him. Is all that remains for her now to obediently wait for death? No, she must return, and perhaps she should not have. She did not even manage to say a word. Izu stood in her way. When he told her that she should stay in place, she jumped from the tree branch. She looked at her and asked herself, is this girl watching? Watching her, she quietly asked, what does she want from her? Then she took out a shard of the sphere and whispered that she looked into the memories of the deputy of the person who gave him the stone of the dark attribute, and thereby almost transformed. She was turning him into a demon, was she? She shouted her name, thought that they knew her name, and even that she gave him the sphere, but how is it? How is that possible? She asked in surprise. But what if the deputy's memory is distorted? She apologizes, but she must hurry. MC stood before her and said that she would not be released. Anger seized her when she met the one who ruined her plans. And she clenched her teeth in rage. She looked at her and advised her not to resist, just let her say why she did it. She did it. Ajin suddenly grabbed the hidden dagger and whispered that she hadn't seen En. There was no need for that, she would have just killed them all. He became very worried. With anxiety, she pulled out the dagger and lunged at Isa, and with a smile thought that the mage was especially vulnerable. When she was casting the spell, she was vulnerable, but she used the Holy Bond spell and was very surprised herself, and she loudly asked, was it silent magic? Then, with a serious expression, said that thanks to the staff he did F. For her, there was no need to say the spell aloud. She was sorry, but she would have to admit defeat. The agent looked away and thought that. That's how it was. She couldn't even reach the dagger. She said it seemed as if she lost. She agreed and said that, however, she did FG. It was a fatal mistake from the very beginning because she didn't learn to understand people. Sinan and Bayet came alive in memory. And she was sure she was right. Who would have thought she would trust such things to some idiots, she said. Shouted loudly, smiling wildly that, however, the gathering of truth is this eternal. Someday they will not be able to stop them. Later, when a crowd of people had already gathered nearby, in the royal palace of Align, she loudly shouted to Jira. Brat, who was standing in front of her, said that she was personally grateful to someone. To him for saving her students from evil forces. He not only creates weapons with holy properties but also everything. He also skillfully wields them and has a piercing gaze. The one who sees the enemy's weak spots, and a wonderful character who has earned the love of others. Indeed, he is an incomparable blacksmith. She smiled and handed him something, and he said that her words warmed his soul. Incredible, she called and said that she appoints him the head teacher of the Glossamagic Academy. He thanked her and said that for a blacksmith it is a great honor. Militara called the mentor and said that she was glad that his actions were appreciated. Izu stood nearby and said. He said with a joyful look that it seemed he would have even more work, and added that he wanted to thank them both, if not If it weren't for them, he wouldn't be standing here. They thanked him again, and he, embarrassed, thought how hard it was. Serenata approached them and with a slight tremor in her voice said that she wanted to express her gratitude once more. Senji approached her. She, carrying something, said that he should accept it as a sign of her gratitude on her behalf. He solemnly presents to the one who saved this kingdom the title of the most outstanding blacksmith of Glosser and extends to him the symbol. This was exactly the symbol of this title gloss of castle. He solemnly raised the item he had just received before the gathered people and suddenly they burst into joyful cries. The students were calling him. They thanked him for saving them and said they wanted to be like him when they grew old. He was an example for people. For people of all ages, she said that to celebrate the festival, a banquet would be held in the palace in his honor. They would be glad if he joined them. He agreed and said that they would gladly come. Olna approached her, called out, "Your Majesty." They nodded to each other and she said that she relies on her. Immediately after that, she went down to the basement where the hostages were sitting. It said that someone clearly could use a whip. Her Majesty kindly entrusted her to carry out the punishment. She could not believe that such insignificant people ended up within the walls of her academy and even his second. The secretary turned out to be a woman named Ajin. Reports say that she was a member of the assembly. Of truth, Bea was surprised to hear this name and thought that now it was clear where she got that darkness from. Miss Stones, she said that it seems she was the one preparing the ground for the demon invasion. Chaos reigned in the country. He became a direct accomplice in her act and began to flee. They scattered in horror when she struck the ground with a whip. She called Sinon and said that usually at the very moment he would face execution. At the moment he broke Amatsurugi, he disregarded Her Majesty's mercy and gladly helped him. He put the academy and the entire kingdom under mortal threat. Now they can no longer turn a blind eye to his antics. He loudly called out to the former deputy director and shouted that all this happened because he was deceived. When that man accepted her, she agreed, and he gained hope. She said that now she would tell him about their tendency to punishment. She sentenced him to prison and ordered him to serve the punishment with hard physical labor in underground mines. The knights began to lead the former deputy away, and he loudly begged her to stop. He promised that he would never do evil again. He only begged to be released. She refused to listen and, grimacing, said that if he truly regretted it, he would start the conversation with an apology, not with silence. She hoped that sincere repentance would awaken in him. At least in solitary confinement, Sinon loudly called the director and said excitedly that he was a victim, not a thief. Criminal, why did she punish him so harshly? Olna looked at him seriously as if she was sure he was guilty. And since he dreamed so much of becoming a blacksmith, they decided to give him a chance to get acquainted with the materials right during their extraction. Guards began to lead him away and he loudly begged to be heard. Later, deep inside the underground mine, he was pushing a cart loaded with materials. He bumped into another worker, got angry because of it and loudly shouted that it was because of him. Called him an idiot because he spilled everything. He apologized with a friendly look, offered help and did it again. The worker approached him, lightly patted him on the back and said that they were, after all, comrades. He angrily asked him to remove his hand and thought that there was no trace of beauty here. Why should he work in such a dirty, disgusting place? The workers with friendly smiles said that they saw how tense he was. After all, he could share with them what was gnawing at him. They would make a decent person out of him, cleansing his heart of all bad things. Everyone wants to help him. He raised his hands above himself and loudly said that they should finally leave him alone and stop hitting him on the shoulder without reason. They paid no attention to this and said that it was already not bad, but his speech still needed work. He got very angry and thought that he hated such positive and irritating people more than anything in the world. How much longer will he really last here until the end of his days in the same? Meanwhile, in the banquet hall, several people approached the main character and he promised to work hard to one day become a blacksmith like him, and her dream was to one day buy a weapon that he would make with his own hands. He said with a confused smile that he was just an ordinary old man. The boy said that it was. This is one of those traits that immediately catch the eye. Militara looked at him and said that the mentor had become even more popular. Izu promised that from now on she would work even harder and continue her research. So as not to humiliate the one for whom the master himself had created the staff, she turned to her and said, "I see you are already full." She was burning with enthusiasm, was glad to see her and would even miss her, called her with a smile and said that she herself It was so nice to see her. She laughed and said that now, indeed, she and the mentor would spend time together again. She smiled and said that she did not dare to say goodbye to her so soon after. After all, she would stay with the master for some more time, and this surprised them both. And she said that the director had generously given her a vacation, so she would spend all that time with him. To him, Militaro was clearly dissatisfied with this and said so, and that's how it happened. That's how it is, she was happy for her. She said with a smile that she definitely would not let the two of them get bored. The main character began to get nervous and wondered what that terrible gleam in their eyes was. The man next to them said that the musketeer squad had returned from the battlefield. When people heard this, they set out for the northern lands to suppress monster activity. Really? And they managed to do it in just a month. No wonder they have a strong commander. This is how it happens every time. It instantly caught his attention, and she said that it was. But this is a special part of the National Army created a few years ago, and as the name itself says, they use muskets, not swords. He smiled and said that it was very original. She said their commander is Bayonetta. They should go greet her. He greeted them. That name immediately caught his eye, and then the musketeer squad appeared. They approached them, and their commander said that the musketeer squad from the kingdom of Glossa. She has already arrived. She called the military and said that the panic stampede that happened at it was heard on the Toyo Plains was successfully drowned out. During this, no civilians or musketeers were harmed. Cleaning, she said she did a great job and would wait. More detailed written report tomorrow afternoon. She noticed that. She trembled and called her, a little worried. Bayonetta happily ran to Duret and shouted, "Dad." And said that they finally met. She hugged him tightly. But he got even more confused and loudly said that she should not. She called him that and said she had to let him go, stepped away from him and whispered that never. She never thought she would run into Dad in the capital. He could have at least warned them about his arrival. Opponent, he laughed embarrassedly. She listened to his story and asked again, did he become a blacksmith for the National Army? In the army, he advanced well. He was promoted nicely. He said it was not his merit, but all thanks to the support of those who were nearby. She joyfully exclaimed that she recognized her good old dad. The guy approached them, called the commander, and was about to ask something about him. She turned around. She turned back to him, called him, introduced him as her dad, and said that he was the one who made the musket F. For her, the musketeers simultaneously said loudly that they were glad to see him, she said. She said that they needed to introduce him to a special musketeer. She brought him and smiled. This is Luca, the rising star of their platoon and her deputy. He, with a confused expression, addressed the commander and asked what she was talking about. They shook hands. The main character introduced himself and said he was glad to meet him. He also introduced himself in response, and then he ran back to the line and looked at them with a barely noticeable smile. Said that there were many young people here. She added that firearms had appeared. They had only recently appeared, and this made it possible to create a completely new combat unit. But many in the army treat them like children, so she would have to grow up and become their commander. Commander, he said he was sure she would handle it. She agreed. She agreed and admitted that this was why she was asking him for a favor. He agreed. He prepared to listen to her. She handed him the musket and quietly said that she would like to ask him to fix it. Divine clemency, only he could handle it. He took it and the system announced, musket, divine clemency, truefall, S-rank, light element. They were so confused and asked, did she mean that he created this weapon? She said with a joyful look that it brought back memories. An ordinary toy turned into a real path. He was a weapon and nothing less was expected from him, he thought with a serious expression on his face. The expression, however, why his weapon evolved again, he said friendly. He smiled amicably and said he would start fixing it tomorrow. Could she please bring it to the workshop? She thanked him. Luca approached them, called him, and asked if he could be present while he worked. He agreed and, smiling, pondered. He was glad that his craft interested the youth as well. Militaris and Izu approached him and called him a. Finished and said that he seemed quite happy, whether because he met her, denied it, tried to think of something, began to run away, and loudly said he would go prepare for musket repair tomorrow, the next day near the ford. He grabbed the musket and began to scrutinize it closely, while the other blacksmiths were working and people were watching him, and he asked if the barrel bent slightly to the right, where did the bullets deviate? Bayonetta agreed and said that this had happened, so she always aims a little to the left. He said that the stamp was also partially worn off. Maybe the mana consumption increased, she asked in surprise. How did he guess that? She really gets tired faster than before. He said that overall the entire musket was damaged. She said so. Probably because of hand-to-hand combat. He was surprised by what he heard and she raised the musket and said that she usually uses it like this. She swiftly ran up behind Luca and pressed the weapon to his throat, which surprised him greatly. From what he saw, he shuddered, loudly shouted to the captain and said that So that she wouldn't scare him like that, she turned around and asked, "What is he talking about?" He didn't even have time to get scared. She said that muskets are also quite heavy. She would like, if it were made much lighter, she could move faster. Darrett said that in that case, as soon as he fixes the real drop, he will immediately improve the muskets for others as well. The musketeers were very happy to hear this, and Bayonetta thanked him with a joyful look. Immediately after this, she rushed for the materials, and Luca watched him intently. In the silence, after he was brought the necessary materials to him, he began disassembling the musket, detached the barrel, and looked inside. Inside, he cleaned the barrel with a cloth and detached that tiny remainder. For the heart, he dipped the brush into the deep S. Water saturation rank B attribute, water description. Description has extraordinary penetrating power and is especially effective. Effectively soaks wood, restoring its damaged structure. He carefully wiped the weapon stock with it. He took on water and prepared equipment for the next task. He dipped the musket barrel into the flame, then he began gently and carefully tap with the hammer to level it. He looked closely to check, then took some C. Lubricant of rank C without attributes. It reduces friction between metals and it also makes magical power more conductive. He lubricated the weapon with it. He took it and carefully wiped it. He started working on the brand and used A ranking. Arrange abrasive particles without attributes for this in order. These are particles that, with the help of magical power, envelop the surface. Power invested in it, with regular polishing, the coating gradually becomes stronger and stronger. You wipe the musket for the last time. After which he returned all Mies. Details were missing, and he said the repair was completed. He gave it. He turned to Bayonetta and she thanked him for it, saying he was, as always, quick. He said that serious repairs were completed. She managed very carefully. She, with joy in her eyes, said it was a weapon that her father made for her, and she did not miss a single day to take care of it. He said with a joyful smile that this is the highest reward for a blacksmith. She turned to her SWAD members and asked if they should try it. Went out immediately. They agreed, moved down the street, and he said he did not expect there to be a shooting range here. She walked beside him and said that it was very close. A few young soldiers noticed them, called him, and asked what they were all doing here together. Militara turned to them and said that soon the musketeers' captain's trial shooting would begin. Apparently, they wanted to watch. They also wanted to watch. They shone with excitement and said they really wanted to see it. The main character said that they all should go together then. The soldiers followed them. He looked at them and said that they had never before seen how to shoot weapons. His uniform was incredible. He saw it up close for the first time. Luca, with a dissatisfied expression, silently walked at the end of the squad and watched. He looked back. His attention was drawn to two souls. The soldiers who were watching them from the side shook their heads and said that today's youth has completely relaxed. Here it is, the very famous musketeers' company. There are only children and the squad is very small. But they spend crazy money. One wishes that the authorities would finally do something about it. They don't need a bird. And the squad that shoots at birds anyway, it would definitely be better if their salaries were raised by that amount. They wanted to drive him out because they wanted to live in luxury. He overheard their conversation and got very angry. When they found themselves at the shooting range, Bayonetta stood in the right place and asked, "Is this, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it. This is the first shot after the repair, right?" She began to aim and said that now she would definitely hit. Everyone looked at her smiling and MC a little. She was a little nervous about it. She fired from her M. Her musket and bullet raced at a crazy speed. It flew to the farthest target and she destroyed it. Her shot in the surprised soldier. Soldier said that the shooting time became shorter than before the repair. Incredible, deadly power. His power seems stronger than a sword. Eternal problem, its attainability. By the way, the pistol can also run out of cartridges. Only ammunition is useless in hand-to-hand combat. No, that's not true. A squad of musketeers in hand-to-hand combat is also quite strong. But the sword, it's somehow calmer, probably. Yes, having a skilled blacksmith's mother for this matter is so encouraging, he thought with a slight tense smile that seemed to say, he needs to try even harder for everyone's sake. That also inspires. Militaris clapped his hands, called the soldiers, and said that the time had come. It's time for them to start training again. The soldier left and he looked at them and said that they were all so excited. Bayonetta agreed and with a smile said that it would be wonderful if they at least showed at least a little interested in weapons. He turned to her and it seems asked, "Looks like there are no problems, right?" She asked as happy. What problems could there possibly be here? Her weapon was incredible. He sighed with relief and said that he still gets nervous when checking how everything works after the repair. Members of her squad called the captain and said in a joyful voice, Voices enthusiastically said that it was wonderful, everything was fixed, just imagine. Simple repair, but what difference does it make? He asks to fix his weapon too. She was outraged. They talked about it and said that everyone should come and turn the need to write their names on this sheet. He was very glad to hear this. The soldiers went to enlist and she said that. Once she dreamed of going on an adventure with her dad, but it was dangerous next to him. Unarmed, he agreed with this but added that he also made himself a weapon and participates in soldiers' training. She was quite confused and he explained that actually one girl advised him to make his own weapon. Militaros added that by using it himself, he would better understand blacksmithing. He said that they also defeated an abnormal monster for a special occasion. To his surprise, it turned out that Dad was quite strong. He denied it. He said that it was all thanks to the overall leadership. She wanted to see his hammer, agreed, and said she was looking forward to it. By the way, what is this called? He really panicked because of this question and she asked. He had a worried look. If he meant that he left it unnamed, he said the name very awkwardly. Finally, Bayonetta was surprised by this, laughed out loud, patted him on the back and said that the commander definitely. He made it up. He glanced aside and noticed that Luca was looking at them His face became very serious and he shouted his name, Duret B. Regret began to get nervous and asked himself if something was wrong with his armor. He approached him and with anxiety in his voice, asked if his pistol was in bad condition. Depending on this, he might look at it untimely. In line, he gathered his courage, called him and said that he wanted to ask him to fight. He was confused and asked him to fight. And asked why he suddenly proposed this, he said so. But in that short time, he understood everything. For the captain, he is a special person. If such a person exists, then he is unnecessary. He called him by name with a worried look and he said, with a serious expression on his face, he will definitely defeat him and make sure that it happens. Not sure if he really deserves to be second in the musketeer squad. Captain always does nothing but protect him, seeing such trust. In this trust between them, he thought that but maybe he's not needed at all. Protagonist grabbed him by the shoulders and loudly asked, what is he even talking about? They are completely different people. He can't handle a musket as skillfully as he can handle people. Bayonetta agreed and loudly said that he makes more than a sufficient contribution to their squad. He was unwavering and declared, this can't go on any longer. Can't go on like this. Secondly, he needs to earn more trust from those around him. She shouted loudly for him to wait and calm down, saying that he cares about the squad more than anyone. He couldn't take it anymore and shouted loudly. She needs to stop giving such empty consolations. She knew she was nicknamed the squad that shoots crows. She was confused by what she heard. He became sad and couldn't respond. What he heard instantly grabbed his attention and Luca shouted loudly that he must defeat this gentleman, whom the army sincerely trusted, and he reinforced the musketeer squad. Anxiety flickered in her gaze. She whispered that she did not even want to see them hurting each other like that. Then he asked. Then information appeared about the recently discovered celestial city Russell. News came that a pair of ice wyverns had settled there. Isn't that so? She agreed, and he said decisively In his voice, it was audible as if he was asking her permission to destroy these monsters so they could duel with that gentleman. The one who destroys them first will win. The celestial city Russell is an extremely rare flying ruin that was only recently discovered. Now it is magically moored in the sky above the capital. They say many valuable things and magical devices are hidden there that cannot be found in other ruins. Militarum said that the army will soon send a team of researchers to that city in the sky, and will also form a punitive squad that will go in search of the ice wyvern. So this duel to the death cannot be allowed. It stunned him and he loudly apologized to Her Excellency the Commander. He loudly said that he still asked her for her to allow them to go on the punitive mission. He froze at his words, after which she called. He called her by her title, Bode, and said that she had also asked for it. They will not be a problem for the national army, he also politely asked. He asked her and she sighed and said she would allow it, but only this time, on one condition: they would be accompanied by the National Army Squad. If they consider the situation dangerous, they will immediately rush to help. Do they understand this? Did they agree? Ridden Bayonetta called him and, beaming with joy, said. He said everything went well, turned around, walked away, and quietly apologized. He apologized for raising his voice earlier. She really did well, handled it wonderfully. Everyone was worried about him, but they did not say a word to him. Then they went to the tavern. She happily said she never thought the day would come when she could drink alcohol with her dad. Izu gladly agreed and said that the ale they treated the master to was very tasty. MC agreed and called the police. Tori asked if she would drink. She refused, laughed, and said that if she drank, this would happen. To happen, Confy called the captain and, looking displeased, said that it was not worth teasing her ex. The commander smiled, looked at her, and asked, "Her loyalty is only to her, right?" He was surprised by their conversation and asked since when the two of them knew each other, and the soldier said that the National Army introduced the personnel rotation as an experiment. He did not understand this, and she said that it was some kind of exchange program to understand the importance of the musketeer squad's strength they reach. They shuffled the national class soldiers, allowing them to train and learn from them. From each other, Confy said that until now she had been a swordswoman. But under this system, she was transferred from the ranks of the main national army, and now she is a musketeer of the same squad. He said with surprise that it was really a good attempt. He was sure that a lot could. This can only be learned in practice. Likewise, when he proposed to create his own weapon, she gladly agreed, and Bayonetta called Iza, who also agreed and said she understood everything. More than 5 years have passed since the creation of the musketeer squad, but not everyone still accepted them. A squad that can only shoot down birds, or a squad about bird hunters. Darrett was worried about this and said that it was. Here it is the very matter that Luca was talking about, but who would he f? Who could have said such a thing at all? She looked away, glanced embarrassedly, and saw that Militaru was nodding, allowing her to tell. She said it was hard to say for sure, but they were soldiers from the main part of the national army. He was stunned by this. Because of this, he couldn't believe it and asked loudly, but during the test shot. The young soldiers looked so happy. Isn't that true? She shook her head, denying it. They objected and, quoting the soldiers, said that with a sword it is calmer. But she called him and asked, he remembers those words, right? He looked surprised by this, and the commander said that in the National Army, swords are trusted more than rifles. Hand-to-hand combat in particular is considered a virtue, and many veterans say so. Bayonetta said, if there are no bullets in the pistol, there's nothing you can do about it. As he said, supposedly there is also enough magic for attacks from afar. He looked a bit disappointed and said that all this is complicated. She agreed and said that what Luca said. They talked about the fight with him. It seems he wants to make everyone recognize the power of the musketeer squad. He thinks about them more than anyone else. He has a strong, unwavering sense of responsibility. Garrett looked at his mug and thought that for him. For ordinary soldiers, he was probably just an old man. That's exactly what he said. He said it but still respected her very much, and that could help them. He quietly agreed with a smile and said that since then he always supported. He recalled what happened 3 years ago when all the frightened peasants were fleeing, a mighty monster attacked his village. Running away from a huge monster, Lucas stumbled and froze, looking at that huge monster. Moved towards him, but she still killed this monster. The single shot that saves. His life was saved, and he was insanely happy about it. About this, she called her dad and said that she wanted to ask him not to hate him. Although they were supposed to duel, she wanted them to get along. He is just desperately trying to protect the musketeer squad. He took her hand, said her name, and whispered that everything was fine. He wanted to be FG. Friends with him too. She sighed with relief, thanked him, and he smiled and thought that there was definitely something to learn from such a worthy young man with a sense of responsibility. Other girls got angry about what happened, but the main heroine. He looked at his mug with a serious expression on his face and thought that he hoped that thanks to this, if the assassination mission is completed, the position of the musketeer squad will improve.